Hello class, welcome to lesson 11.5, which is all about dividing polynomials. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to divide a polynomial by a monomial, as well as divide a polynomial by a binomial. Alright, so let's start by dividing by a monomial. So I've split this one into two different examples here. We have 4x squared minus 18x divided by 2x on the left-hand side. Then we have 2y squared minus 3y minus 9 divided by 3y on the right-hand side. So one way that you can divide by a monomial is you can write it. We have 4x squared minus 18x divided by 2x. That means everything in the parentheses is divided by 2x. So I can break it up and put each of my terms over 2x. Then this looks kind of familiar, like simplifying that we've been doing. So if I look at my 4x squared over 2x, I know that my 4 and my 2 can reduce. Remember, now we are not multiplying the two fractions together, so we can't reduce on the diagonals. Since we have a subtraction symbol in the middle, we can only reduce each fraction by itself. So 4 over 2, that becomes a 2 on the top, and then we have 1x on bottom, 2x is on top. That means 1 will cancel on each. And since there's 2 on top, the bigger number on top, we're going to leave that one. So that one's left as 2x. And we have 18x over 2x. I know my x's will cancel. 18 divided by 2 is 9. And that is my answer. Okay? Let's try the next one. We have 2y squared over 3y minus 3y over 3y minus 9 over 3y. So our first one, we have a y on each, so we're left with one y on top. And then 2/3 can't be reduced, so we're going to leave that as 2. We have one y on top over 3. And then 3y over 3y, that just becomes a 1, so minus 1. Be careful that you don't mistake that as going away completely and just ignore it. Remember, this does equal 1. And then we have minus a 9 over 3, that becomes a 3 on top. And then we have a y on the bottom. And that is our answer. Okay, so hopefully doing those aren't too bad for you. Why don't you go ahead and try this one on your own. Try to shrink it a little bit for you. Or here we go. Try this one on your own. Hopefully you ended up with getting 8z plus 3. If not, why don't you try this one, and even if you got it correct the first time, try this one anyways. Hopefully with this one you got negative 2x plus 3 halves minus 7x. If not, be sure to ask either myself or a friend for some help and let's see what happened so we can get you to the right answer. Alright, let's take a look at example 2 and see if we can figure out how to divide by a binomial instead of just a monomial. So divide by two terms instead of one. When you have division by a binomial and then you have quadratic on top, what you want to do is you want to factor that quadratic so we have something in the numerator that matches what's in the denominator, and hopefully we can cancel something out. Alright, so let's try factoring this 2r squared plus 5r minus 3. Since I have an a term, remember, I have to multiply my a term times my c term, so 2 times negative 3, that gives me a negative 6. We want something that multiplies to a negative 6 and adds to a positive 5. So what terms would get us to a negative 6 multiplying and a positive 5 adding? If we use positive 6 and a negative 1. Alright? Now remember when we did this, the way that we solved these was we would rewrite our quadratic, 2r squared, and if I do minus, I'm going to write my 1 in there just to help me remember that I'm using my 1, and then plus 6r minus 3. Remember, we broke up that middle term into two different numbers. Now we can group them, and if we group them like this, we can pull an r out of the first one. We're left with 2r minus 1, and we can pull a 3 out of the second one, and we're left with 2r minus 1. So that looks good because we ended up with the same thing in each parentheses. That means that when you rewrite it, you can use your 2r minus 1, and then remember you take the other two terms that you pulled out and you put them together. So another way to write 2r squared plus 5r minus 3 is 2r minus 1, the quantity of 2r minus 1 times the quantity of r plus 3. So let's rewrite that. We have 2r minus 1 over r plus 3. And now let's divide by our r plus 3. Okay, so I have an r plus 3 on the top and 1 on the bottom. So those cancel out. Those just become 1s. So our final answer ends up being 2r minus 1. Alright. Why don't you guys give this example a try and see how you do. Hopefully you ended up with 2c plus 3. If not, be sure to ask for help. I know this can be tricky at first. Okay? So don't be shy to ask. Let's look at example 3. Now we are going to try dividing by using long division. Okay? So I remember the first time I learned this, I was a little overwhelmed, but then by the time I got it, I thought it was really fun. So hopefully it's the same for you. So I know we don't typically associate fun with long division, but I think this way is easier than the last way that we were just doing. So let's say we have x squared plus 7x minus 15, and we are dividing by x minus 2. Okay? So your first item goes inside the long division. So we write x squared plus 7x minus 15 on the inside, and we're dividing by x minus 2. So the way that this works is what you want to do is we want to look, what do we need to multiply x by in order to get x squared? Most of you are going to say, well, that's easy. We need to multiply by an x. So what we do is up top where there's a single x, so in this case 7x, it's not an x squared, it's not an x cubed, it's just a regular x. So we're going to put our x above this term because it matches. And now what we do is we multiply x times x, that gives us x squared, and then we do x times the negative 2, that gives us minus 2x. Okay, and then from there, we will subtract everything. So I'm going to put this in parentheses to help draw my eye to it. So x squared minus x squared, that's just 0x squared. Okay, and then 7x minus negative 2x, that becomes positive 9x. So we have a positive 9x. Then, after we have our positive 9x, what we do is move on by bringing our next term down. So we have a minus 15. So now we say minus 15. We look at our leading term. So in this case, our leading one is a 9x. So now we look, what do we have to multiply our first term over here by in order to get 9x? We have to multiply by a positive 9, right? So So we're going to say plus 9. And now, again, we're going to multiply 9 times x and 9 times a negative 2. So 9 times x, that gives us a 9x. And then 9 times a negative 2, that gives us negative 18. Apparently, I got a little excited when writing minus 15. And put 115, but there we go. Fix that. Now, again, I'm going to subtract. So I have 9x minus 9x. That cancels and goes away. And I'm left with negative 15 minus negative 18. So that becomes negative 15 plus 18. Or we're left with 3. Okay, so 3 is our remainder because we have no other terms to bring down. But the way that we write remainders, actually the way you write your answer, you would say x plus 9, okay, so what we had up on top of our division bar, plus 3 over x minus 2. So you take your remainder and you put that on the top of a fraction, and you take what you were dividing by, and that goes on the bottom of your fraction. Okay? So we have x plus 9 plus 3 over x minus 2, and that is your answer for this example. So these work really nicely when you have quadratics that don't factor. Long division works nicely for that. Alright, why don't you guys try to set this one, or try this one. I will set it up for you to help. You put your y squared minus 4y plus 5 inside. You have a y minus 3. And you want to first start by finding what you need to multiply your y by in order to get y squared. Hopefully you said y. And remember that y is going to go above the matching term down below. Okay, so continue from there and see if you can find the right answer. Hopefully you ended up with y minus 1 plus 2 over y minus 3. If not, be sure to ask. Maybe go back and check your steps, make sure they all made sense. Make sure you didn't accidentally add instead of multiply, or multiply instead of add, or subtract, you know, the silly little errors that sometimes happen. Let's look at example 4. We have the area of a rectangle is represented by 3x plus 90. Its length is x minus 3. Divide the area by the length to determine the width of the rectangle. Okay, so we have the area of our rectangle. We need to divide it by our length in order to find the width. So again, I'm going to look, what do I need to multiply x by in order to get my 3x? I have to multiply by 3. So 3 times x gives me 3x. 3 times a negative 3 gives me negative 9. I'm subtracting, so 3x minus 3x, that's 0. 90 minus a negative 9, that becomes 90 plus 9. So now I have 99 as a remainder. So the way that I write this answer, I say 3 plus 99 over, remember, our expression that we are dividing by. And this represents 3 plus 99 over x minus 3 represents our width of the rectangle. Alright, why don't you guys take a moment and try to find the base of this triangle. Hopefully you ended up with 8 plus 18 over 2x plus 3. If not, as always, ask questions. And let's take a look at our last example. Example 5. We have an x cubed minus 34x plus 45 divided by x minus 5. Okay, so let's start by writing what we have. We have an x cubed. Do I have any x squareds? No. One thing with dividing monomials, binomials, all of that, you always need to have a placeholder for each one. So even though we don't have any x squareds, we're going to represent it by putting in a 0, x squared. It'll make sense once we start working on it. And then I can continue. Minus 34x plus 45. Okay? And we are dividing by x minus 5. So now, let's look at our first term. We have an x cubed, and over here we have an x. So what do we have to multiply x by in order to get x cubed? We have to multiply by x squared. So let's do our x squared times our x. That's going to give us our x cubed that we want. And then x squared times negative 5. That gives us a minus 5x squared. Let's do our subtraction. So x cubed minus x cubed, those go away. 0x squared minus a negative 5x squared. So that becomes 0 plus 5x squared. So we're left with a positive 5x squared. Next, we have a 5x squared. So what do we need to multiply our x by in order to get 5x squared? We have to multiply by a 5x. So we have plus 5x times our x. That gives us 5x squared. I realized I forgot to carry my next term down. There we go. Sorry. So I multiplied 5x times x, and now I need to multiply 5x times the negative 5. So that's minus 25x. Subtract 5x squareds, they cancel. We have a negative 34x minus a negative 25. That becomes negative 34 plus 25, which that leaves us with a negative 9x. Now I can carry down my last term, which was plus 45. What do I need to multiply by in order to get negative 9x? I need to multiply my x by a negative 9. So I have a minus 9 up top. So negative 9 times x, that gives me negative 9x. Negative 9 times the negative 5, that gives me positive 45. And if I subtract negative 9 minus negative 9, so negative 9 plus 9, that's a 0. And then 45 minus 45 is also a 0. So we don't have a remainder. Our final answer is x squared plus 5x minus 9. Alright, that is our final answer. Here's the very last example for you to try. Remember, if you are missing a term, it doesn't matter which one it is, you need to write a 0 in as a placeholder for that term. Okay? Write a 0 in for a placeholder. Hopefully you set this one up something like this. Alright, now go from there and see if you can solve it. Hopefully you ended up with a b squared minus 2b minus 8 as your final answer. If you have any questions at all, please be sure to ask either myself or a friend, and I'd be more than happy to help. I hope you guys have a fantastic day.